I think I I'm usually drawn to more serious, you know, severe topics, I guess, when I like to write, and so I was trying to walk around to find something that was, you know, comedic, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at the statue in the front left, and she didn't look very happy, and so I was trying to think about what she might have been unhappy with. She's missing her hands, so
Yeah.
living for eternity without your hands would be pretty upsetting. So so I started to write about that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and the bit you showed me, that's good stuff, I think. Yeah. And do you find it an interesting exercise if you get a serious topic?
Because it was the opposite thing of what I'm used to
Yeah.
wanting to write about, and so it was good to kind of step out of that box and kind of think about how you might write that way.
I looked a lot at the woodcuts, or the Chinese woodcuts, and I think I was really surprised that a lot of the themes we associated with classical Western art, you find in these very Eastern images as well. You know, pastoralism. The one that struck me the most was, it was called The Family of Four, and it was a soldier returning home, standing with his wife, his child, and his dog. That was the fourth member of the family. But him very prominently in military uniform. And it reminds you of these tombs, Roman tombs, where they're clearly a freedman family, but the son in the military garb means they've stepped up.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so I saw the same echo in that. And so I was just really struck that these things that we associate with sort of classical Western, they're really just human.
And I saw something, it caught my eye because it was the painter as described as untutored.
Right.
And it's just a simple portrait of the American early 19th century. It's a portrait of a young man holding a copy of Milton.
Yes, I noticed that.
And it just seems to me there's a nice play there between the untutored painter and perhaps the most educated of all English poets. So I mean that's something that could be dealt with.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Yes, that is a very good idea. Yeah. Fairly near it actually was the picture called In the Gallery. I don't know.
Oh yes, that's quite striking.
Yeah.
That is a very striking.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's interesting. Of course, we're going into the gallery to look at the pictures, and there's a picture called In the Gallery, and showing what? I think it's sort of four elegantly dressed sort of Victorian ladies, wasn't it, who were tittering at the naked statue of Venus.
Well, and three of them are clearly gossiping about the fourth.
Yeah.
The fourth is holding a book, and the others have nothing but
fans or something.
light, frivolous. And of course, and Venus is in the mirror too. So I mean, the women are sort of a non-reflection of Venus, who is reflected. There's a lot of wonderful stuff in that painting.
Yeah, that's very clever. I mean,
there's a painting called Hide and Seek that I really liked, and here too there's a little dog. Only he's in the so the woman's in the foreground, and there's a door that's partly open, and the little dog is not looking at her; he's looking at something else. So there's something hidden in the picture that is what she's playing with, and I think there's some fun levels at which one could play with this, but that's beyond my skill at this stage.
At this stage, day after tomorrow, I think.
There was something in the label about how a figure of a girl had been painted out, and I think she was.
Say that again?
There was something in the label about how when they did X-ray analysis of that, there had been a figure of the girl, a girl as well.
Yeah.
I think near the dog. So I don't know if the dog.
It's actually up a little bit from the dog. They say you can see it, and if you look above the dog, you can't see it.
But originally it was a woman and a girl playing hide and seek, and
and the girl was painted
the dog, but the dog is not who I think she's playing hide and seek.
No, but they said there was some possible.
And it's the French word, which is cache-cache, which means hide, and neither one can see the other. So they're both, in a sense, they're both hiding.
We were looking at the blind girl.
Yeah, I don't know how many else people were struck by that. What's it called? Nydia? Yeah. Which, of course, is an interesting example of a work of visual art which is itself based on a work of literature. So if we base a Latin poem on it, that's sort of several stages of sort of literary and cultural influence, isn't it?
Mhm.
But yeah, I thought that was an extraordinary statue in terms of the drapery and the skill of the artist.
I found it interesting, they had a little stand right next to her that said, that showed a photograph of her surrounded by plaster casts of Renaissance, well, of famous sculptures that we've seen, like Guanajuato and a bunch of other things. So it was displayed in that hall, she being, original, and the rest all being casts.
Mm.
And then they changed it up, took those all out, stored them, and those have since disintegrated because they were badly cared for. So here she is, the blind girl who's lost her companions, but she...
I ended up thinking about flower girls too, but not just Nydia the blind. Well, there's two statues there, and not just Nydia the blind. I think she was a Christian, blind Christian flower girl of Pompeii, but there's also the flora. I thought might be mislabeled because it was actually inscribed on the flower basket behind her was the name Glycera, who I think was an ancient flower girl in Pliny the Elder. I'd have to sort of
really,
yes. So there was a contrast between an ancient flower girl and a modern flower girl, both in marble.
There's a picture with birds facing into the wind, and it's in a field with kind of swept with snow.
Well, yeah, one of the
Forest
Chinese
in the background.
woodcuts, yeah.
It's rather stark, and I thought that would be interesting because the words are all simple,
Yeah.
and we know all the words.
Mm.
You know, we
Yeah,
come up with
yeah.
Nix and Compass and.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent
something could be
idea.
done with that. The
Yeah.
only problem is after a couple of lines of just describing the scene, then you'd have to do, what are the birds going to do? They're either going to fly away or they're going to eat something.
I had a few things that I really liked, especially sort of the Eastern, the Chinese pottery, and the Tibetan altar, and the little chest or thing in the corner. So I started writing about the chest in particular.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you showed me one line. Have you thought about how it's going to go on from that? If it's going to be
Yeah,
a longer poem?
it's going to be very short, just about sort of that I was going to have something like, well, it's traveled far and wide and it's seen so many things, but no one's ever seen what's inside of it.
Right, yeah.
I noticed they had a painting of Vespasian, the emperor, receiving the news that his son Titus had conquered Jerusalem. And the detail that I noticed, he had his foot on the emperor had his foot on a footstool, which to me brings a biblical echo in the Psalms. It always says the earth is the footstool of God or something like that.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it was kind of ironic, this imperial sovereignty in conquering Jerusalem. So that was a detail I thought.
Yeah, that is
Yeah, one of the things that I looked at in the museum were the serial Japanese illustrations from like the 1930s. And what really interested me about them was that they were these self-contained scenes that worked to create a whole story or a whole sense. And I kind of I think the way that I understand Latin poetry works, especially when we talk about, I guess, the small elegiacs that are like 4 lines, which I feel like kind of the other line. And that's what you want in poetry. You want it to be something that's a self-contained, self-supporting scene, but also works as a part of a whole. And they were very beautiful. I learned something from them. I don't know if you guys got to see them.